Siglo XX con Mike Wallace.
A continuación, en siglo XX,
If you don't like the message, shoot the messenger.
los riesgos de la denuncia.
I had life threats on my kids. I got scared, started carrying a handgun.
Hoy, el alto precio que se paga por decir la verdad.
Karen Soakwood suffered the ultimate retaliation. She was murdered.
Soy Mike Wallace y esto es Siglo XX.
Siglo XX con Mike Wallace.
Los hombres y mujeres que denuncian a sus deshonestos o inescrupulosos empleadores se perciben a sí mismos como parte de la tradición estadounidense donde se valora más a los individuos que a las instituciones, pero seguramente no son vistos así por las compañías de alto nivel o los funcionarios gubernamentales que son blanco de sus denuncias. Para ellos, los denunciantes son agitadores desleales que quebrantan el lazo de confianza entre el empleador y el empleado.
It's the old adage, if you don't like the message, shoot the messenger.
Tomemos el caso del Dr. Jeffrey Wigand, quien en 1995 reveló que su ex empleador, la tabacalera Brown & Williamson, añadía peligrosos químicos a sus cigarrillos. En lugar de responder a los cargos, Brown & Williamson decidió atacar la entereza de Wigand.
They've been going around to my family, my friends, digging up and digging here and digging there.
Finalmente, la tabacalera elaboró un expediente de 500 páginas en el que se alegaba que Jeffrey Wigand golpeaba a su esposa y que era un ladrón y un impostor.
This is a man who shoplifted liquor from a liquor store. This is a man who was arrested for abusing his spouse. He's lied about his jobs. He's lied about his education. He's lied about his scientific accomplishments.
Not a single one of the allegations about Jeff Wigand has anything to do with Brown & Williamson's conduct.
So it's just a smear campaign?
Totally a smear campaign.
La reacción de la compañía Brown & Williamson es típica. Toda denuncia genera represalias.
It's almost an animal instinct. When someone hits me, my first reaction isn't to think, well, maybe I had that coming and there's a lesson to be learned from this. I want to flatten that son of a gun. I want to take him out.
Esa fue la reacción de General Motors en 1966 cuando un joven abogado, Ralph Nader, testificó ante el Congreso acerca de ciertos descubrimientos que había hecho durante la investigación para su libro Inseguro a cualquier velocidad. El principal blanco de la declaración de Nader era el Chevrolet Corvair, un automóvil de la General Motors. Esta ejerció represalias rápidamente.
They went after him and investigated his private life. Things that seemingly had no bearing on the issues raised in Unsafe at Any Speed. But the idea was to discredit Ralph Nader as a public persona.
Well, I began to realize that eyes were following me in January. And late in January, my non-listed telephone number began to get calls from various people, men and women, at various hours of the day. These calls increased in their intensity the evening before. I was testified for the Senate subcommittee that was looking into the auto safety issue.
General Motors menospreció los cargos de Nader, los consideraba ridículos. Incluso el presidente de la compañía, James Roche, se vio forzado a admitir ante un subcomité del Senado que la compañía había contratado investigadores para descubrir detalles sórdidos en la vida de Nader.
I am not here to excuse, condone, or justify in any way our investigating Mr. Nader. To the extent that General Motors bears responsibility, I want to apologize here and now to the members of this subcommittee and Mr. Nader.
Pero para Nader, la investigación de General Motors generó dudas.
I don't intimidate easily, but I must confess that one begins to have second thoughts of the penalties and the pain which must be incurred in working in this area. I don't want to have a climate in this country where one has to have an ascetic existence and steely determinations in order to speak truthfully and candidly and critically of American industry.
I think the fact of the matter is that the conduct of this investigation constitutes an harassment of a citizen who is making, in his own way, a serious attempt to tackle the question of automobile safety.
Otra víctima de hostigamiento fue Ernest Fitzgerald, un analista de costos que en noviembre de 1968 descubrió una sobrefacturación en los contratos del Pentágono. Pero cuando fue llamado a testificar ante el Congreso, Fitzgerald dijo que sus superiores habían dejado claro exactamente lo que querían que él declarara.
First off, I was supposed to say that we weren't really sure that the cost overruns existed. We were. There was no question about it. They'd been covered up for years at the time I testified.
Los excesos ocurrieron debido a que los contratos de defensa permitían gastos adicionales luego de la firma del contrato y todo salía de los bolsillos de los contribuyentes. Cuando intentó buscar excesos en la construcción del avión de cargas C-5A, Fitzgerald se topó con obstáculos.
My attempts to get the facts on the technical status of the C-5A program in the last few months have met with serious resistance. And I think we must recognize that some people do benefit from higher cost of specific defense items.
7 meses después de rendir su testimonio, Fitzgerald obtuvo un nuevo cargo muy por debajo de su capacidad.
He was reassigned from being the Air Force's cost control chief to auditing bowling alleys in Thailand.
Aún así, Fitzgerald denunció otros gastos gubernamentales.
The principal one that was brought to my attention was the cost increase on the construction of a 20-lane bowling alley in Thailand. Now that's I don't mean to make light of that. It's a very important thing, and someone must do it.
Para noviembre de 1969, el Pentágono había dejado claro que no quería que ese alguien fuera Ernest Fitzgerald y lo despidieron. Grabaciones de la Casa Blanca luego revelaron que el presidente Nixon había ordenado su despido.
Richard Nixon said that Ernie Fitzgerald is probably a good cost-benefit analysis person, but he's not a very good team player. Therefore, we should let him bleed.
The Ernie Fitzgerald case, of course, is a classic example of somebody blows the whistle and then instead of getting applauded for it, finds the whole government apparatus working against him.
Fitzgerald luchó para revocar su despido por canales de servicio civil y finalmente en septiembre de 1973 fue reenganchado por el Pentágono.
And then the Air Force engaged in another common tactic. They put him in an empty office and paid him a government salary to gather dust.
I'm specifically excluded from looking at the big weapons procurement programs that I spent so much of my time, most of my time on when I was in the Pentagon before, and which got me in trouble, of course. One of my old bosses told me that it was a kindness to me, designed to, in part, keep me out of trouble. And if I could prove that I was a team player, they might let me look at them again.
Frustrado, Fitzgerald demandó al Pentágono y al presidente Nixon. Sus acciones legales fueron exitosas, pero le tomó 14 años obtener nuevamente su trabajo original y 13 años lograr una compensación financiera por parte de Nixon.
The suit was settled out of court. Richard Nixon paid Pentagon whistleblower A. Ernest Fitzgerald about $140,000 rather than go to trial.
Pero incluso ese triunfo legal no le dio a Fitzgerald un sentimiento de reivindicación.
You really can't get away with it, even when you're right. By it, I mean committing truth, which is a violation of the bureaucratic code of the hills. Admiral Rickover has said many times that if you must sin, sin against God, not against the bureaucrats, because God may forgive you, but the bureaucracy never will.
Aún así, Fitzgerald continuó presentando la verdad en el Pentágono durante la década de los 80, concentrándose mayormente en abultados costos de artículos de uso cotidiano. Por ejemplo, notó que la Marina pagó $435 por cada martillo que comprados al por menor costarían 17. Y que la Fuerza Aérea pagó $7,622 de los contribuyentes para una cafetera. Fitzgerald creía que los estadounidenses debían conocer estos excesos.
The very least the taxpayers should accept from their employees is the truth. And that's all so-called whistleblowing is telling embarrassing truths.
La mayoría de las vergonzosas verdades que los denunciantes exponían a la luz pública en los años 60 tenían que ver con gastos y corrupción en las agencias del gobierno, pero en los años 70 surgió un nuevo tipo de denunciante, con acusaciones de fechorías contra la industria de energía nuclear. Y estos nuevos denunciantes no hablaban solamente de excesos de gastos, sino de asuntos de vida y muerte. Esta historia al regreso en siglo XX. En 1957, cuando el presidente Eisenhower consagró la primera planta de energía nuclear, la Comisión de Energía Atómica predijo que el aprovechamiento de esta energía para usos pacíficos sería tan eficaz que para 1980 trabajarían 250 plantas nucleares. Y a comienzos de los 70 esa predicción parecía posible luego de un boicot árabe de petróleo que sumergió al país en una severa crisis.
There was a frenzy to build the plants, and where whistleblowers came in was that there was a frenzy to complete them as quickly and cheaply as possible, regardless of what the legal requirements were. And whistleblowers are the sort of people who say, no, we're going to do it right, we're going to play by the rules, or at least I'm not going to go along with it.
Un empleado nuclear que no estaba de acuerdo con los lineamientos de la compañía era Karen Silwood, una técnico y activista sindical de la planta Kerr-McGee en Oklahoma, que elaboraba barras de combustible de plutonio radioactivo para reactores nucleares. En septiembre de 1974, Silwood declaró ante la Comisión de Energía Atómica que creía que graves violaciones de seguridad estaban dañando la salud de los empleados. Estimulada por su sindicato, Silwood recolectaba evidencias para probar que la compañía sabía acerca de la exposición de sus empleados a condiciones inseguras e ilegales. En la tarde del 13 de noviembre de 1974 partió sola en su automóvil para encontrarse con un reportero del diario New York Times y un funcionario sindical. Se presume que llevaba documentos que probaban la inseguridad de la planta. Nunca llegó.
28-year-old Karen Silkwood, who claimed to be delivering papers proving gross safety violations and falsification of records at a Kerr-McGee plutonium facility, died in a mysterious car accident. She was en route to Oklahoma City to deliver the papers to National Union officials and a reporter. 4 private investigating firms claim it was no accident, saying dents in the rear of Miss Silkwood's car indicate it was forced off the highway. But the final FBI and Highway Patrol reports say the crash was an accident, that Miss Silkwood fell asleep at the wheel.
La supuesta evidencia que Silwood llevaba nunca se encontró. La autopsia reveló que su cuerpo contenía píldoras para dormir y que estaba contaminado con radiación de plutonio.
At Miss Silkwood's apartment, investigators found the source of the plutonium contamination, food in her kitchen. The Atomic Energy Commission said there is a good possibility the food was intentionally placed there, and someone may have been trying to poison her.
Los familiares de Silwood demandaron a la planta Kerr-McGee acusándolos de sembrar el plutonio para amedrentarla e impedir que declarara. Tomó 5 años para que el caso llegara finalmente a juicio.
Numerous questions surrounding Karen Silkwood remain unanswered as a 10-week trial charging Kerr-McGee with negligence comes to an end. However, there has been strong evidence of serious health and safety deficiencies at the plant. Dr. John Goffman, a health expert, testified that exposure to plutonium, one of the most toxic substances known, guaranteed that Miss Silkwood would have cancer.
Los funcionarios de la planta negaron cualquier violación a la seguridad. Dijeron que creían que Karen Silwood se había contaminado a sí misma con el plutonio para avergonzar a la compañía. El jurado deliberó durante 3 días.
The 6 jurors said Kerr-McGee was guilty of negligence in allowing radioactive plutonium to be taken from the plant. And they awarded the heirs of Karen Silkwood $10.5 million in damages for her contamination. The decision was met with applause from courtroom spectators and brought tears to Karen Silkwood's mother.
I just think it's wonderful, and I'm finally glad that they've got Karen's name clear. She was only trying to help those people get a clean plant.
It says it sends a message to the government and to the nuclear industry that they have to tell the truth, and that if they don't tell the truth, they have to be prepared to pay the fiddler.
La decisión del jurado revocada en la apelación fue finalmente avalada por la Corte Suprema y eso llevó a un arreglo fuera de la Corte. Kerr-McGee accedió a pagar a la familia de Silwood $1.38 millones por daños.
I think the public is much better off now that this decision has been made, that maybe no more of these companies will will do what they did to her.
2 años después de la muerte de Karen Silwood, 3 ingenieros de alto rango de General Electric renunciaron como protesta a las políticas y prácticas de la industria. Robert Pollard, funcionario de la Comisión Reguladora Nuclear encargada de inspeccionar la seguridad, se unió a ellos.
Ms. Silkwood, the JE managers, Mr. Pollard from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, all were sort of the initial rocks in what became an avalanche of nuclear power whistleblowers.
Entrevisté a Robert Pollard cuando renunció a la Comisión Reguladora Nuclear en enero del 76.
You want your leaving to have a public impact?
Yes, because I think it's important that the public knows what's going on. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I thought about this a long time. And if I had very much doubt that I was wrong, I wouldn't be doing this. I don't think I'm wrong. And I think the public ought to know what the commission is doing so that the public pressure will get it changed. No individual can get it changed.
35-year-old Bob Pollard has been involved with nuclear power for a long time. After college, Pollard joined the Atomic Energy Commission, now the NRC. They sent him to graduate school and then brought him to Washington, where he has been evaluating safety systems for various nuclear plants. For the last year, he has been project manager for the overall safety review of a plant called Indian Point 3.
In my opinion, it will be just a matter of luck if Indian Point doesn't sometime during its life have a major accident.
William Anders, a former astronaut, is chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. He told us that a nuclear power plant does not operate in this country unless it is absolutely safe.
We will not allow them to begin construction. We will not allow them to begin operation, nor will we allow them to continue to operate unless we are satisfied at all times. We and our very extensive staff are satisfied at all times that these plants are safe and are not impacting the environment in an untoward manner.
Have you ever heard of a fellow by the name of Bob Pollard, Mr. Anders?
The name does not jump to my memory.
Bob Pollard is one of your project managers, and he resigned today. The reason he resigned was he is not sure about the safety of your program.
Bob Pollard has never tried to contact me or any of the members of the commission. I've never even heard of Bob Pollard before.
So I asked him, I said, would you sign a license for Indian Point 3 at this moment, Mr. Pollard? And he said, if I had the authority? I said, yes.
Well, I think it's a...
Wait. No question in my mind. And I said, $1 billion has been spent, and you would say what?
That the plant does not meet today's regulations.
And then what would you do about it? Just forget about the plant? Let it rust?
No, I think I would, if I had the authority to do it, the only thing I could do would be to force it to meet today's regulations.
And how much would that cost, do you think?
I don't know. I don't particularly care. That's not my job.
My job is to make sure the plants
I agree with him on
are
that
safe.
That is indeed our job.
Now,
but I think it raises the question is where has Mr. Pollard been here the last year or so, when apparently it's part of his job to make those kinds of suggestions on the record and to indeed guarantee that the public is getting the kind of service from their government and all its employees that they're being paid to get. But I think that it's very unfortunate, both for you and for this agency, that this young man didn't express his views to his senior supervisors and to the commission before he made his splash.
Well, that sounded like a reasonable proposition, so I decided to put it to Bob Pollard. Bob?
Well, I did try. I didn't try necessarily with Mr. Anders, but I tried with my supervisor. I tried with the legal advisors, how to follow the code of conduct for federal employees.
And what happened?
At each turn, I'm told I shouldn't rock the boat. I shouldn't keep raising these concerns. It's going to reflect adversely on my employee evaluation. There's been no change in the agency since the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was created. It's the same people, the same policies and practices. Keep it from the public, keep it low-key, and that's why I'm resigning.
3 años más tarde, el 28 de marzo de 1979, los temores de Robert Pollard se hicieron realidad en una desconocida planta nuclear llamada la Isla de las 3 Millas.
Federal investigators are on the scene this morning near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, trying to untangle what happened in what is now being called one of the most serious nuclear power plant accidents in history.
There were a combination of mechanical failures and apparently also some human errors that brought us at least partway down the road to a major meltdown.
We've always been assured that the walls are so thick and the shielding is so substantial that the public runs no risk from radiation getting out of a power plant. What happened yesterday? Some radiation got out.
That's right, and this leads back to why I resigned. The public has been seriously misled by the nuclear industry and by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission about the extent of hazards in today's nuclear plants.
Con el accidente ocurrido en la Isla de las 3 Millas, el público se dio cuenta del peligro que años antes había despertado la preocupación de Robert Pollard y de otros denunciantes.
They were consistently, from all different directions, pointing out that the owners of the plants weren't treating nuclear technology any more carefully than we would the system for our plumbing or our sewage or the kitchen sink.
Incluso durante la crisis de la Isla de las 3 Millas, la Comisión Reguladora Nuclear insistió en que las plantas eran seguras.
There was nobody hurt? Is that correct?
Nobody hurt.
Nobody hurt.
You're saying this proves the safety systems work?
I'm saying that we're dealing with a industry which has provided many backups, many systems, and despite the failure of the systems, we still come out with acceptable risk.
El debate sobre las normas de seguridad en las plantas de energía nuclear se centró en el tema del riesgo tolerable, como se lo llamó. Los defensores del riesgo tolerable insistían en que debido a la complejidad de la tecnología nuclear, simplemente debían aceptarse ciertos riesgos y que un ambiente libre de riesgos era prácticamente imposible. Pero el tema del riesgo tolerable no se limitaba a la industria de energía nuclear. Fue usado por funcionarios en el programa espacial de la nación con espantosas consecuencias. La historia del estallido del Challenger al regreso en siglo, la explosión del transbordador espacial Challenger en el invierno del 86 fue todo un desastre. Y de acuerdo con un denunciante llamado Roger Bujolet, fue un desastre que nunca debió ocurrir. Bujolet era ingeniero de la compañía Morton Thiokol, constructores de los cohetes propulsores que causaron la explosión. En los meses anteriores a la tragedia, Bujolet y sus colegas advirtieron a la NASA en muchas oportunidades sobre la posibilidad de una catástrofe. Pero la NASA, decidida a no cambiar la fecha pautada del programa, optó por descartar el problema y considerarlo un riesgo tolerable. Luego vino ese terrible momento el 28 de enero de 1986.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. We have no downlink. We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded.
Horas antes, una tripulación feliz y confiada subía al transbordador.
Future astronaut Krista McAuliffe said they had gotten over the frustration of the earlier delays. And technicians had an apple for her moments before she actually entered the shuttle. But the crew had to sit on the pad for an extra hour, while NASA took a close look at the ice that formed during the night in the freezing temperatures. There was concern that some of that ice could strike the shuttle during liftoff. Finally, after a detailed ice inspection, the word was given, go for launch.
And liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
It was the first launch from the newly refurbished pad 39B in more than 10 years. NASA officials say they saw no indications of any trouble or difficulty prior to the horrifying explosion.
Altitude 4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up.
Oh my God. The explosion appeared to destroy Challenger. The solid rocket boosters emerged from the fireball, continuing to fly uncontrollably for several seconds before plunging into the Atlantic Ocean, leaving a trail of smoke. The Coast Guard immediately launched an emergency rescue effort, but all that was found were small pieces of debris scattered over a wide area. NASA officials put together an investigation team this afternoon, but gave no indication of the cause of the explosion.
It will take all the data, careful review of that data, before we can draw any conclusions on this national tragedy.
NASA sources say the immediate attention is being focused on what appeared to be fuel or vapors that appeared around the solid rocket boosters and the main fuel tank a second or two before the explosion. NASA bristles at suggestions that they launched the shuttle under pressure today.
There was absolutely no pressure to get this particular launch off. We have always maintained that flight safety is our top priority.
Pero había otros que no estaban convencidos. 6 días después, el presidente Reagan nombró una comisión de expertos dirigida por el antiguo secretario de Estado William Rogers.
As we move away from that terrible day, we must devote our energies to finding out how it happened and how it can be prevented from happening again.
La comisión Rogers, como se la conoció, recibió documentos sorprendentes.
As the panel convened, its chairman, former Secretary of State William Rogers, seemed bent on playing down leaked NASA documents, suggesting that NASA officials had been warned that there might be a safety problem with the Challenger's rocket boosters.
Eran advertencias de ingenieros de Morton Thiokol, la empresa contratista de Utah que hizo los cohetes que impulsarían al Challenger al doble de la velocidad del sonido. La mañana del lanzamiento, 2 de estos ingenieros, Bob Evelyn y Roger Bujolet, veían el despegue.
When it ignited and cleared the launch tower, I whispered to Bob that we had just dodged a bullet.
I was in the middle of my prayer, watching the screen and praying, thank you for making me wrong. And kaboom, it went. I walked right out of there and went in my office, closed the door, and cried.
Did you think it was going to blow up?
Absolutely.
You did?
Absolutely.
Roger Bujolet estaba tan seguro porque había observado alarmantes similitudes en otro lanzamiento del transbordador un año antes, en enero de 1985.
When we recovered the boosters and disassembled them, I found hot gas, massive amounts of hot gas past 2 joints in the primary seal. That was a giant red flag that had never occurred to that magnitude ever in any previous flights.
Bujolet y Evelyn concluyeron en que los sellos circulares de goma llamados anillos O se tornaban frágiles en climas templados y eran incapaces de mantener encerrado el combustible caliente. 3 meses más tarde, las alarmas sonaron nuevamente luego de una misión en abril del 85.
Now, was that in any way similar to what eventually happened to Challenger, or was it a different problem?
Almost identical.
Really? It was almost identical, and yet no changes were made?
Basically, no. The worrying, we turned the dial up on worrying a lot. Then the customer, you
the
guys
customer?
better,
You mean NASA?
Yes.
The customer, okay.
Says, fix it, but don't change anything. Now, that's pretty hard to do, you know, and I don't know if the right people at that point in time had any idea what the total consequences could be.
Pero Roger Bujolet sí sabía, por lo que el 31 de julio de 1985, 6 meses antes de la tragedia del Challenger, escribió un memorando en el que advertía que si los propulsores no se reparaban, el resultado sería una catástrofe y la pérdida de vidas humanas.
You flatly stated that we're going to have a disaster.
That's right. That's
you
right.
actually predicted what happened.
That's right.
And still, they didn't say, okay, everything stops until we fix this.
No, nothing stopped.
El día antes del lanzamiento, Bujolet con otros ingenieros de Morton Thiokol convocaron a una reunión de emergencia al ser informados de que la temperatura en Florida había descendido bajo cero.
And within 10 or 15 minutes, it was very clear what the purpose was going to be that day, and it was to stop that launch because of a high probability of failure.
Decididos a impedir el lanzamiento, los ingenieros acudieron a sus supervisores.
And we had all the managers in between the vice president all the way down to the working level engineer. And there was no hesitation, and there was no problem with stopping the launch. Everybody wanted to stop the launch.
Pero según Bujolet, la NASA, en una conferencia telefónica, informó que estaba decidida a proceder.
They wanted to launch. NASA wanted to launch. They were in that meeting wanting to launch, and everything that we said, actually ended up falling by the wayside and I was challenged on every point that I made.
If they didn't launch, what were they afraid was going to happen?
Maybe they'd get another round on the evening news that they couldn't get a shuttle off as per schedule.
And then he added,
there was pressure. I was there. I felt the pressure.
That pressure to launch despite the cold, he said, was felt most acutely by his bosses at Morton Thiokol, who had been warned that NASA might change contractors. He says his bosses caved into the pressure, even though he pleaded with them to vote against the launch.
I was told by my colleagues after the meetings that I was literally screaming at them, namely that the lower the temperature, the more hot gas gets past the seals.
After the decision to launch was made, Beaujolais drove home with Bob Ebeling.
We would have leveled the plant if we had had a box of grenades. We were so damn mad. It was just a terrible feeling that they were sending these people to their death and we couldn't stop it.
5 meses después de la tragedia, la Comisión Rogers concluyó que la explosión del Challenger podía evitarse.
Key findings. The accident was caused by the failure in the joint of one solid rocket. No other element of the system contributed. NASA had played a kind of Russian roulette, sticking with a faulty design, and for years failed to fix it and finally treated it as an acceptable flight risk.
The Commission says there is no evidence of any outside pressure to launch. NASA put pressure on itself. It has always been a can-do agency, the Commission reported, but sometimes it reminds NASA, no, can't do is the only right answer when human lives are at stake.
We've suffered a tragedy and a setback, but we'll forge ahead, wiser this time and undaunted as the spirit of the Challenger and her 7 heroes.
A pesar del desastre, Beaujolais continuó trabajando en Morton Thiokol, pero al poco tiempo descubrió que estaba siendo castigado por haber denunciado la tragedia del Challenger.
Managers shunned me. Managers isolated me from meetings. They isolated me from the customer. It was just a very devastating time for me. And in July, I could no longer take this hostile environment, and so I asked for sick leave and left.
Con un diagnóstico de trastorno por estrés postraumático e incapaz de continuar trabajando como ingeniero, Beaujolais tuvo que vender su casa y abandonar Utah.
Oh, I have real deep roots here, I thought. In fact, I did. And I hate to pick up and leave, but I'm not left with any alternative at all. So I'm going to take my wife, and Hera and I are going to put back the pieces and try to continue in another location the best we can.
What you see as numbers inside the parentheses are the actual squeezes on the O-ring seal itself.
Beaujolais comenzó a dar conferencias en universidades de todo el país acerca de sus experiencias, pero la recuperación fue lenta. Descubrió que no era el único miembro de la familia Beaujolais que se había visto afectado por esa penosa experiencia.
My family suffered very much. My girls, for instance, constantly heard people demeaning me and having me damned as the cause of the ultimate demise of Thiokol. It hurt them very much. My wife suffered very much because I was not a whole person for quite some time. I finally healed in about 1.5 years.
You say you're healed.
Yes.
But I don't know if the camera can see this, but several times in this interview, your eyes have teared up. In fact, they're tearing right now.
Well, that's dealing with a very, very sensitive issue. Right after the disaster, I would probably be in uncontrollable sobbing. Even when I gave talks and I just mentioned the astronauts' names at the end of my talk, I could no longer see my notes. I had to wipe my eyes clear.
But you still...
Oh, I'll always have feelings. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a situation where you learn how to handle what you've been through as opposed to erasing what you've been through. It'll never be erased. The moments of that meeting, the anguish after the meeting, that's always going to be indelibly imprinted in my mind and my whole body.
Debido a que Roger Beaujolais no logró salvar su carrera como ingeniero espacial, terminó pagando un alto precio por denunciar a los funcionarios de la NASA que ignoraron sus advertencias. Desafortunadamente, ese es el destino de muchos denunciantes. Ciertamente fue el destino de Jeffrey Wigand, el hombre que osó exponer los secretos de nuestra poderosa industria tabacalera. Esta historia al regreso en siglo. La industria tabacalera nacional fue muy criticada a comienzos del 64, el año en que el inspector de Sanidad calificó oficialmente el cigarrillo como nocivo para la salud. Pero en las 3 décadas siguientes, los magnates del tabaco mantuvieron a raya a sus críticos hasta que un bioquímico llamado Jeffrey Wigand los denunció. Wigand, con un sueldo anual de $300,000 en Brown Williamson, tercera compañía tabacalera de la nación, tenía conocimiento de los secretos celosamente guardados por la compañía, y sacarlos a la luz pública condujo a devastadoras revelaciones.
We're in a nicotine delivery business. And that's what cigarettes are for. Most certainly. It's a delivery device for nicotine.
A delivery device for nicotine. Put it in your mouth, light it up, and you're going to get your fix.
You get your fix.
El doctor Jeffrey Wigand expuso por primera vez a la luz pública lo que la industria tabacalera había estado negando durante años, que ellos alteraban la nicotina en los cigarrillos con peligrosos químicos como el amoníaco. El proceso se conoce en la industria como incremento de impacto.
There's extensive use of this technology, which is called ammonia chemistry, that allows for nicotine to be more rapidly absorbed in the lungs and therefore affect the brain and central nervous system.
What you're saying is nicotine is addictive, and that's what makes tobacco the profit-making substance that it is.
I think nicotine is addictive. I believe nicotine is also the pharmacological agent that's within tobacco that keeps people going back.
Pero Thomas Sandefur, ex jefe de Wigand y gerente ejecutivo de Brown & Williamson, no decía lo mismo cuando rindió testimonio.
I believe with nicotine it's not addictive.
He lied in front of Congress. He knowingly lied in front of Congress. He knows that the reason why cigarettes are successful and why people smoke is not because of flavor. It's not because of image. It's because nicotine's present.
And then there are these documents, thousands of pages of confidential scientific reports and legal memoranda from B&W's secret files, which experts say support Dr. Wigand's claim that Brown & Williamson's executives have had strong reason to believe all along that nicotine is addictive and that their tobacco products cause cancer and other diseases. The documents found their way to Dr. Stanton Glantz, a professor of medicine at the University of California Medical Center in San Francisco.
What is the story that the documents told you?
They told me that 30 years ago, Brown & Williamson and British American Tobacco, its parent, knew nicotine was an addictive drug, and they knew smoking caused cancer and other diseases.
Wigand dijo que una de las razones por las cuales Brown & Williamson lo contrató el 1 de febrero del 89 fue para encontrar la manera de distribuir la nicotina al cerebro sin exponer a los fumadores a los agentes contaminadores.
They were looking to reduce the hazards within cigarette, reduce the carcinogenic components or listed carcinogens that were within the tobacco products.
He says his goal at B&W was to make a cigarette that would be less likely to cause disease.
People will continue to smoke no matter what kind of regulations. If you can provide for those who are smoking and who need to smoke something that produces less risk for them, I thought I was going to be making a difference.
Pero según Wigand, todos sus esfuerzos por producir un cigarrillo más seguro fracasaron. Frustrado, llevó sus quejas ante su jefe, Thomas Sandefur.
What did he say to you?
I don't want to hear any more discussion about a safer cigarette. If we pursue a safer cigarette, it would put us at extreme exposure with every other product. I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Lawyers representing B&W and Thomas Sandefur have said that all this, as well as other accounts of conversations with Thomas Sandefur, are absolutely false. We asked Dr. Wigand what his reaction was to what he says was Sandefur's decision to abandon the safer cigarette.
I would say I got angry.
He was your boss.
I bit my tongue. I had just transitioned from one company to another. I was paid well. It was comfortable. And for me to do anything precipitous would put my family at risk.
You were happy to take down the $300,000 a year.
I essentially, took the money.
I did my job.
Así que el Dr. Wigan abandonó la idea de tratar de crear un cigarrillo nuevo, más seguro, y se concentró en los aditivos, los sabores y otros compuestos en los productos tabacaleros. Fue su investigación de uno de esos aditivos que, según él, lo llevaron al término de su carrera en Brown & Williamson.
The straw that broke the camel's back for me and really put me in trouble with Sandifer was a compound called coumarin.
La cumarina es un aditivo que da al tabaco un sabor dulce, más placentero, pero también se sabe que ha causado tumores en hígados de ratones.
I wanted it out immediately, and I was told that it would affect sales, and I was to mind my own business.
After his confrontations over coumarin, Dr. Wigand says he was not surprised when on March the 24th, 1993, Thomas Sandifer, newly promoted to Chief Executive Officer, CEO of B&W, had him fired.
And the reason for firing that he gave you?
Poor communication skills, just not cutting it, poor performance.
Word of Dr. Wigand's battles with Brown and Williamson attracted attention in Washington, where in the spring of 1994, a Democratic Congress and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, were investigating the tobacco industry. Dr. Wigand was contacted by their investigators, and after notifying Brown and Williamson, he talked with those investigators. Shortly afterward, he was stunned by a couple of anonymous telephone calls.
And in April 1994, on two separate occasions, I had life threats on my kids.
What?
We had life threats on my kids.
Dr. Wigand told us he doesn't know where they came from, but that, understandably, they frightened him. He described the threats by referring to his diary.
A male voice that was on the phone that said, "Don't mess with tobacco anymore. How are your kids?" Then on April 28th, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, relatively the same voice says, "Leave tobacco alone or else you'll find your kids hurt. They're pretty girls now." So, I got scared. I started carrying a gun.
Really?
Yep. Started carrying a handgun.
Obviously, the tobacco industry, Brown and Williamson in particular, is scared.
Well, and they have reason to be scared. This is a man who was there. He knows where the bodies are buried, and they're doing everything they can to prevent him from leading the police to the spot.
Brown and Williamson contrató a media docena de grandes empresas para trabajar en el caso de Wigan. Los investigadores se ramificaron a todo lo largo del país buscando cualquier cosa que pudieran utilizar para desacreditarlo.
Facing explosive allegations from former top executive Jeffrey Wigand, Brown and Williamson tobacco executives have released a searing private investigation of their former chief of research and a no-holds-barred effort to discredit him. Entitled The Misconduct of Jeffrey S. Wigand, available in the public record, the 500-page report attempts to document allegations ranging from shoplifting to resume padding.
Brown and Williamson también publicó su expediente de Wigan en el diario Wall Street Journal, el cual posteriormente reportó que un análisis del expediente, así como investigaciones independientes realizadas por este diario, indican que muchos de los argumentos contra el Dr. Wigan están respaldados por evidencias escasas o contradictorias, pero un abogado de Brown and Williamson rechazó esa afirmación.
Mr. Wallace, that's dead wrong. There's not scant evidence. The Wall Street Journal did not go over these scores, literally scores of untruths told by Jeff Wigand that we showed to them.
And Gordon Smith went on at some length to say that Wigand's life, quote, is a pattern of lies.
I don't understand, frankly, Mr. Smith. I really don't understand. Brown and Williamson must be in a panic if they're going after this man as hard as you are.
You're wrong. There are no material inaccuracies in that book. None whatsoever.
You wish you hadn't come forward? You wish you hadn't blown the whistle?
There are times I wish I hadn't done it, but there are times that I feel compelled to do it. If you ask me if I would do it again, or if do I think it's worth it? Yeah. I think it's worth it. I think in the end, people will see the truth.
Por supuesto que esa es la fuerza moral que da a los denunciantes el valor de hablar. creer que en una sociedad libre todos deben saber la verdad sin importar las consecuencias. Algunas reflexiones finales al regreso en siglo. Por mucho tiempo los denunciantes estuvieron solos. Se arriesgaban al opinar en contra de sus poderosos empleadores con el riesgo de no tener a quien acudir en su defensa. Pero en el año 89, el Congreso aprobó la Ley de Protección de los Denunciantes. Leyes similares habían sido aprobadas en varios estados y, adicionalmente, grupos de interés público comenzaron a proporcionar asistencia legal y financiera a los denunciantes e incluso a ayudarlos a conseguir nuevos trabajos. Pero las nuevas leyes y los grupos de apoyo no pueden hacer mucho para ayudar a los denunciantes durante los tiempos difíciles. Por ello se requiere una fortaleza especial para realizar una denuncia y enfrentar las consecuencias de un acto de esa categoría. Un estudioso de las leyes que ha hecho un seguimiento de estos casos sugiere que el credo de los denunciantes debería ser: ninguna buena acción podrá quedar impune. Soy Mike Wallace y esto es Siglo XX.